So hello webinar attendees, my name is Marisol Morales and I serve as the Vice President for Network Leadership with Campus Compact. We're so happy that you could be part of our national webinar series today, as this is our 7th installment of this webinar. Today's topic is exploring the connection, community engagement, and college completion, and we have our talented presenters, Debbie Scire from New Hampshire Campus Compact, Helen Rosenberg, Travis York, and Lynn Pelco, and I'll be doing introductions of them shortly. But before I begin with the introductions, I wanted to remind folks that if you haven't signed up for other webinars in our series, you can go on compact.org and sign up, as well as view previous webinars. In addition, I want to plug our bi-weekly podcast, which is Compact Nation. You can find it on any podcast listening app that you like to download a podcast from, and I'm a co-host along with President of Campus Compact Andrew Seligson and our Director of Minnesota and Iowa Campus Compact Emily Shields. Our next podcast will be released tomorrow and it's focused on accreditation. So let me get into the introductions of our presenters today. First, we have Debbie Scire. She is the Executive Director of Campus Compact for New Hampshire. Prior to coming to Campus Compact for New Hampshire, Scire served as the Director of Cooperative Education at Northern Essex Community College in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and was responsible for cooperative education, internships, and service learning. She served in a similar capacity at Merrimack College in North Andover, Massachusetts. Her research interests include college completion and the extent to which foundations have influenced higher education. In addition, we have Lynn Pelco. She's Associate Vice Provost for Community Engagement in the Division of Community Engagement at Virginia Commonwealth University, where she also directs the Office of Service Learning. She earned her PhD in school psychology from Pennsylvania State University and has held clinical, administrative, and faculty appointments at the University of South Australia, Bucknell University, the College of William and Mary, and the Pennsylvania State University School of Medicine. Her research interests include university community partnerships, service learning, and university student development. Next, we have Helen Rosenberg. She's a professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and directs the program in gerontology at the University of Wisconsin Parkside. Throughout her career, she has involved students in experiential learning, first through developing an internship program in the sociology department, and then through her efforts to involve students in projects in her classes. She's a former faculty director at the Center for Community Partnerships, where she promoted civic engagement as the core university's value and worked toward modifying the faculty reward structure to include community-based learning for students. And finally, we have Travis York. He's the Director of Student Success, Research, and Policy at the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities, APLU. His research centers on the issues of college student access, success, and educational equity. His work has focused on examining pathways into and through post-secondary environments for low-income first-generation minority students. Currently, York is the project lead and co-PI of APLU's Includes Project, a National Science Foundation funded effort to diversify STEM faculty and serves as co-PI on the U.S. Department of Education IES assessment grant titled Affording Degree Completion, a Steady Completion Grant to Accessible Public Universities. I just want to thank our presenters today. We're really excited about the topic and thinking about college completion and access and are excited to get started. So I will turn it over to our presenters. Thank you.
I'm going to change it. Well, thank you for joining us on this webinar, everyone. And we're pleased to say that there are more than 300 registered for this webinar. In a few minutes, we'll be saying a little bit more about the makeup of the audience. My role in this webinar is to set the stage and to provide a bit of context for this webinar titled Exploring the Connection, Community Engagement, and College Completion. This topic emerged really a few years ago as a result of multiple conversations with campus stakeholders who felt that while community engagement was seen as a very positive focus on their campuses, it was really very rarely viewed as being core to the college's agenda. By thinking about community engagement as a strategy to address such a critical issues, opportunities arise for new partnerships and alliances, and visibility for high quality community partnership activities on campuses is more greatly enhanced. Today's webinar offers an opportunity to hear from 3 experts who talk about their research through this lens and demonstrate the impact that community engagement or service learning programs can have on improving college completion rates. The slide in front of you, next slide, gives us a quick snapshot of some of the impact of low college completion rates. The first fact really says that 59% of full-time students who enrolled in bachelor level institutions earned a degree in 6 years. And from an equity lens, one of the most disturbing facts is the disparity of college completion rates between students from high-income families versus those who are from lower-income families. And our colleges and universities also are impacted when students don't complete, skewing fiscal forecasts and searching for ways to replace lost revenue. Public support for higher education is eroded, and workforce development is negatively impacted as well. Nationally, we stand to lose the ability to compete with countries whose college education populations are actually on the rise. Next slide, please. So to address low college completion rates, certainly many programs and co-curricular activities have been created. In today's session, I think it's also important to say that while there is no one silver bullet that will comprehensively and on its own address college completion, but that community engagement is one of many, many strategies that are actually working. Next slide, please. So today we have 3 presenters who will talk about their research in this area, and there are a few themes that have emerged from their work. First, definitely there's a positive effect of community engagement on completion, and it holds true across institutional types and student populations. Data collection around this work is important to making the case, and it can be a vehicle to support the extent to which community engagement is aligned with the institutional priority of college completion. And implications from the studies that we'll hear about, we'll be talking about here today, provide justification for campus leaders to include community engagement in their institutional retention plans. And we hope today's dialogue can help us see how community engagement explicitly contributes to institutional effectiveness and student success agendas on campuses. And there's a growing body of evidence from the studies provided and others that suggest community engagement has an emerging role to play. And we also have a research brief that's available that highlights this connection. And we put that link actually up in the chat room. Next slide, please. So before I turn the webinar over to our first presenter, I'd like to call your attention to some terrific work on the subject of college completion that Campus Compact initiated. It's called the Connect to Complete program that was funded by the Gates Foundation, which is really a model that combines service learning and peer advocates to increase student success. Peer advocates who enrolled students, led service learning courses, served as mentors and advisors to students. And this was seen as a strategy to encourage academic, social, and personal development. The work was done at 9 community colleges across the country, and it served about 6,500 low-income students. And after 6 semesters, so the results were really not immediate, persistent rates among students in service learning programs were 6 points higher than among those non-participating comparison group. And you can find this great resource book on the Compact website on Connect to Complete program. The resource book has more info on the model, tips on implementing and administering the program, and evaluation of other forms you might need. You can find that when we put the link there on the chat room as well. And as we move to the next slide, I'd like to turn the presentation over to the first presenter, Lynn Pelco.
Oh, thank you, Debbie, for introducing the context. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at VCU in Richmond, Virginia, but first we have a quick 3-question poll just to get a feel for how many of you, there's 94 of you in the audience, and get a little background. So can we launch the poll? So go ahead there, wherever you are, and complete these 3 quick questions. The first is just, what type of higher education institution do you represent? Go ahead and check that. The second, what is your primary role at your institution? So give us a good feel for who's in the audience. And then this last question really gets to the data that we're talking about today. Is your institution currently collecting degree completion data that can be disaggregated into subgroups of students who are versus who are not community engaged by whatever definition your institution uses? So we'll give that a few minutes, and then we will post the results. All right, so mostly 4-year institutions, excuse me, and mostly administrative and staff folks in the audience. Not surprising, we have most folks saying, not really sure whether there is an ability to disaggregate our institutional graduation data by student subgroup, students who do and don't complete community engagement activities. So it's good for us to know as presenters where that landscape is amongst the folks there in the audience. So we'll close that out and remind ourselves as we're going through. Excuse me, at VCU, we've been tracking curricular community engagement for quite a while, about a decade in our banner system. Our service learning classes are designated. So I'm going to talk today basically about that curricular service learning. It's only been in the last 4 or 5 years where we've been able to connect the service learning data in Banner with graduation rates on a regular annual basis. Next slide. Just a little background, VCU is in Richmond, Virginia. We're a large urban university with about 31,000 students. We have a very diverse student population with about a 30% underrepresented minority student population and about a 30% Pell eligible student population. And we're going to talk really about our undergraduate population in this presentation. Next slide. At VCU, we have a definition widely accepted across campus for service learning, and we, through the Service Learning Office, control the designation process to make sure that we have integrity of quality in those classes and those designations. And last year, about 4,000 students participated in service learning. Just as a footnote, we do also track the persistence and graduation rates for our living learning program. That's community engaged. I'm going to talk today about service learning. Next slide. The very first thing that we had the opportunity to do was look at the connection between service learning and graduation degree completion through a dissertation. A student of mine, Kelly Lockeman, did a retrospective 6-year data dive to see the graduation rates of students who took service learning versus those who did not. That was the matriculating cohort of 2005, and I know you'll have access to this full published article sent to you and connected to the website, so you can read that yourselves if you're interested. The analysis that Kelly used is called discrete time survival analysis, a very intricate statistical approach that allowed us to parse out the varying criteria that contributed to graduation. I think the main takeaway there at the bottom, number 3, is that service learning participation at any point during those 6 years produced a subgroup of students that graduated at very much higher rates, particularly for our minority and low income students. 71% of students who took service learning and were in minority groups graduated, and versus 29% of those same minority group that did not take service learning. And for low income, about the same, enormous spread, 72 versus 28%. Next slide. But we really weren't able every year to have a doctoral student as good as Kelly, so we needed to look to a way that we could do this on an annual basis and collect critical graduation, retention, and student success data. So we asked our institutional research whether we could use the data that's being collected to answer these three questions. What is the degree of participation? How many students are taking service learning? What subgroups are participating versus non-participating? We have an inclusive excellence objective institutionally and wanted to make sure there weren't pockets of our student population that were missing this opportunity. And then finally, how does participation correlate with retention and graduation for every matriculating cohort? Next slide. Our annual banner data that we're able to use is the kind of data that most universities would have in their records. So number of participants, demographics of those so that we can disaggregate into subgroups of interest, and then again, our year-to-year retention, and then graduation completion data on a 5- and 6-year basis. Next slide. These are the results from just our past 2017-18 analyses. And again, we see on a every year cohort basis a higher retention and a higher graduation rate for students who participate in service learning versus those who don't. For these annual analyses, if you remember, Kelly's dissertation was define service learning students as any student who took one service learning class at any time. For these annual analyses that we do, we define service learning students as having taken at least one class in the first 2 years. So we're seeing these kinds of results based on that definition of service learning versus non-service learning. We also, when we disaggregate into some of the more at-risk student groups, we're seeing significant differences in retention and graduation rates, and those are there on the slide for you. Next slide, please, my last slide. So these data aren't helpful unless we share them broadly, both internally and externally to stakeholders of interest. So we have annual online reports that we share that provide these data. We also have infographics. Those are particularly important for our department chairs, for academic advisors to see these impacts, and of course for the provost and president. And then finally, the how-to handouts are helpful in describing the model that we use to look annually at the impact of community engagement, curricular community engagement on important institutional objectives such as retention and graduation. I will now pass it on to Helen.
Thank you. This is Helen Rosenberg, and I'm going to be talking about an article that colleagues of mine and I published in the Michigan Journal of Community Service Learning. And I just wanted to credit my other authors, Susan Reed, Ann Statham, and Howard Rosing. We were all at 3 different universities, 1 private and 2 public. Next slide, please. We started out examining how enrollment in service learning classes for non-traditional students affected re-enrollment and persistence to graduation. But we wanted to examine other characteristics of students as well. Given that we were all at different types of universities with distinct cultures, we compared outcomes for each university separately. Our research questions were, and they're highlighted here, are students who enroll in classes with service learning more likely to re-enroll or complete their degrees than students who are not enrolled in service learning classes? Does the relationship between service learning and re-enrollment vary with students entering characteristics or experiences on campus? And is the impact of service learning stronger in some types of institutions than others? Next slide, please. So we started out using Tinto's explanatory model of retention, which posits 4 factors that are good predictors of retention. Academic integration is critical for part-time students in public institutions who live and work off campus. Social integration is important for full-time students on 4-year campuses. And we hypothesize that service learning increases both academic and social integration, leading to greater commitment to the institution and to degree completion. But there are also barriers that Tinto mentioned. 2 barriers to retention, according to him, are financial pressures, such as student loans or working outside of school, and psychological differences, such as variations in social supports from family and individual motivation to succeed. Next slide, please. We've been doing research comparing our universities for some time. We found that adult students want to give back to their communities and that their past experiences enhance their knowledge and skills. Yet we believe because of those same past experiences, adult learners get less benefit from service learning than younger students with less experience. Next slide. So this describes our sample. We followed incoming students in fall 2009 for 3 years, including freshmen and transfer students. The slide shows the 3 universities that participated in this research. All of us obtained data from the University Institutional Research Office. And so as an institution, we collect data on graduation, on retention, and whether students are enrolled in community-based service learning or not. Next slide, please. When we started out, we were interested in non-traditional students, and so examined measures of non-traditionality, as well as demographics such as gender, race, transfer status. We added whether the student was ever enrolled in a service learning course, the grade point average, and interaction terms. Our dependent measure was if the student re-enrolled or graduated. Next slide, please. We dichotomized all of our variables to make them similar across all 3 universities. We entered measures of non-traditionality first, then demographics, and finally, if the student had taken a community-based service learning course or not. In the second step, we entered full-time status and finally GPA, as these are considered the most important predictors of retention. We included interactions as well, but results were inconsistent, and so we eliminated the interaction terms in our final analysis. Next slide, please. So we compare the outcomes for all students across all 3 universities. Each university is unique in terms of size, location, and demographic characteristics of students. DePaul is a large private urban university. University of Southern Indiana is public and rural, and University of Wisconsin-Parkside has the most non-traditional students among all the campuses. Next slide, please. This table describes the characteristics of students of each campus. University of Southern Indiana and University of Wisconsin-Parkside had the highest enrollment of whites. DePaul University is an urban campus in Chicago and draws more students of color. The majority of students were under 24 years of age at all 3 universities. UW-Parkside had the highest percentage of first-generation and part-time students, while DePaul had the lowest percentage of freshmen. The gender distribution across the campuses was the same. Grade point average and graduation rates were highest at DePaul. Next slide, please. The following tables summarize our findings. The effects of service learning are strongest at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside, where most students are part-time, first generation. The effects of service learning are attenuated by full-time status and higher GPAs at the other universities. Participation in service learning seems to mitigate deficits that part-time students face. Let's take a look at the impact of specific variables on re-enrollment and graduation in the following slides. Next slide, please. So this looks at age. Younger students are more likely to persist at USI and DePaul, but effects were modest. Age did not contribute to understanding persistence and re-enrollment at UW-Parkside. Next slide. Race is an inconsistent predictor of persistence, with white students more likely to re-enroll. The effects of race become insignificant once grade point average is added to the equation for the University of Indiana and DePaul. For University of Southern Indiana and DePaul. Students of color were more likely to persist at University of Wisconsin-Parkside. Race is an inconsistent predictor of persistence, but in general, white students are more likely to be retained. Next slide. At University of Southern Indiana and University of Wisconsin-Parkside, transfer students were more likely to persist until grade point average was added. Then the effects of transferring into the university became insignificant. At DePaul, transfer students were most likely to persist. Transfer students come in with credits that increase the likelihood of their persistence. Articulation agreements across universities and two-year colleges promote retention. Next slide, please. Full-time status is a strong predictor of retention. It had a consistently strong impact on retention over the 3 years of our study across all 3 universities. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to summarize this. Service learning seems to promote persistence for all the students across all the universities, both traditional and non-traditional. Part-time enrollment seems to pose the greatest challenge for non-traditional student persistence. And service learning is especially important to persistence of students at an institution with the most part-time students and commuting freshmen. And I guess the other thing that we learned from this is that because our campuses are so different, the impact of community-based service learning varies by the type of institution. So I'm going to, in closing, turn this over to Travis.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I thank you to Campus Compact for inviting us to present today, and thank you to my fellow co-presenters whose work is a great complement to what I'll be sharing with you all today. So I'm excited to share with you a study that we recently published in the Journal of College Student Development. There we go. And this was a study where we were looking at the positive effects, or what we found to be the positive effects of service learning on transfer students' development of sense of belonging. And this was a multi-institutional analysis. And I, like my colleagues, was also doing this work in conjunction with others. And so I am a co-author on this study with Frank Fernandez, who's an assistant professor of higher education at the University of Houston. And as Marisol and Debbie mentioned at the beginning, I'm located at the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, where I am the Assistant Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs. So I'm going to give a little bit of brief background here, although I imagine that most of our audience is pretty familiar with this information, so I'll try to keep this somewhat brief. But with this study, we were specifically looking at transfer students, and this was because some previous research that I have published in the Michigan Journal of College Student Community Engagement and Service Learning, and in the the Journal for International Association on Service Learning and Community Engagement, we had found that for particular subgroups of students, in particular low income, first generation, and minority students, that nationally, looking at some national data, that those subgroups of students tended to not only be impacted by service learning, just like you've just heard, all students seem to have an impact who participated in service learning, but those subgroups of students saw increased impacts in their completion and retention rates. And because of this information, we had started to look at why or how service learning experiences might be interacting for students who may be in transition or who may have other mitigating factors that have historically decreased their likelihood of completing. So this data was pulled from a 2008 national data set, and so as such, we've provided some information here on transfer students at the time. So in 2008, there were of the 3.6 million college students enrolled in America, more than 1 in 3 were transfer students, had transferred at least once during their college journey. However, there was a striking difference in the persistence rate between students who completed their degrees at their starting institution and those that completed their degrees at a different institution or transfer. That translated into a 29.1 percentage point disparity across the groups. There are obviously some complexities of attrition here. So we were borrowing on the work of many others in this area who discuss who have done work around transfer students and around students who stop out or attrite. There was also work that had been done specifically around service learning. Researchers, Aston, Vogeslang, Ikeda, and Yi, Brixton, et cetera, Eiler and Giles, many others, who had found that service learning as an active pedagogy was positively related to students' social integration, institutional commitments, retention, academic success, and acquisition of cognitive skills. And you heard some of those, especially coming from, you can kind of see how some of these attenuations commonly associated with service learning and might line up with some of the areas where researchers like Tinto have argued that transfer students or students attriting from institutions might have some particular areas or particular needs, excuse me. And as you might expect, these contributed to the conception of our study. So I did want to clarify for anybody, I imagine with this group, you're all very, very familiar with what exactly we mean with service learning. And this is the definition that we used in our study. So we were trying to be pretty clear with our study that we were trying to utilize 4-credit educational courses as CNCS has defined service learning in the past. So we were pretty clear that these were courses tied to regular academic credit. Our question with this study was, do college students who participate in service learning courses after transferring into a new college have an increased sense of belonging at their new institution? And also, does that sense of belonging relate to their increase in retention and or persistence? And as you've just heard, we were also using a Tinto framework to investigate this information. And in particular, we were applying Tinto's theory of attrition with Pat Tiernzini and Bob Reason's comprehensive model or conceptualization of how students' independent variables kind of affect their educational experience and how that experience then relates to outcomes. And there's a great quote at the end of this slide here from Tiernzini and Reason that talk about how the effects of these experiences are often treated conceptually and empirically in a highly segmented and discrete fashion, as if certain experiences or sets of experience are the only factors at work shaping student learning, change, or persistence. And we were looking to try to look at those together. So here's the conceptual approach we were taking. We were trying to account both for students' pre-college characteristics and experiences, understanding institutional context, peer environments, individual student experiences, and to see what outcomes were related. In particular here, we were looking at transfer college students, the development of their sense of belonging. And one of the unique things that we have argued around service learning is that it is a unique pedagogy that in fact includes a hybrid experience that involves in-classroom experiences, out-of-classroom experiences, and curricular experiences. So we were using the Diverse Learning Environment Survey. The survey that came out in 2011 had data from 2008 to 2009, and that's produced out of UCLA's Higher Education Research Institute. Our sample included 494 matched transfer students, and this included multiple campuses, both at public, private, and religious colleges and universities. So it's a national sample for these students. Our dependent variable was the Diverse Learning Environment's scale of sense of belonging, or this construct, which is intended to measure the extent to which students feel a psychological sense of integration on a campus. Our independent variables of interest, of course, we were mostly interested in service learning courses. And one of the unique things about the Diverse Learning Environments survey was I've been working with Harry for the better part of a decade at this point in time, and one of the things I've pointed out to colleagues at this at Harry is that many national studies that do capture service learning participation do so in very amorphous ways. Either they ask students how often did they participate or if they participated, but there haven't been many national data sets that capture exactly how many service learning courses have been taken. One of the unique things about the DLE measurement is that it does ask specific numbers. So it is a Likert scale, but it asks students between none, one course, two courses, 3 or 4 courses, and then 5 or more. So that allowed us to do some really exciting kind of dosage effects, look for dosage effects. As far as control variables, we wanted to be careful to really make sure that we were controlling for various variables that are oftentimes related to sense of belonging and to success. And so we here controlled for several of the variables that you can see on your screen. As far as methods of analysis, we were doing pretty standard statistical work here. We were using ANOVA tests, looking at box and whisker plots, and using OLS estimations for regressions. We did also do several post hoc tests. So here are some of our findings. And I should mention here, one of the most exciting things that we found here was that there seems to be a curvilinear or bivariate relationship between sense of belonging and caution our audience to let you know this is not a longitudinal data set. This is a snapshot. So while we can look across the number of courses and see, if you look at the figure on your screen, in the box, the line indicates the average across these groups, and you can kind of see a curvilinear relationship here, all positive, but somewhat not consistent. It would actually take looking at students and measuring their sense of belonging as they take courses over time to really verify if there is a causal relationship here. So this is correlational, not causational at this point in time. But we did do some ad hoc tests to really kind of investigate this. So as you can see here, students who took 2, 3, or 4 service learning courses tended to have slightly lower sense of belongings than students who only took 1. And then 4 and 5 or more courses. And we show that a little bit more clearly in just a moment. You can also see from our regression analysis here, we were looking at many different controlled variables. And I will let you know too that we actually, just like my other colleagues presenting today, we actually included many other control variables to see if there was an effect, and for interaction effects. And for interaction effects that weren't significant, we removed those to look at the model a little bit more clearly. And one of the things that we did in this that you can see here is that we used a block regression analysis, and the final block that we included actually also involved other course types in our original modeling. And so we looked at different types of courses that also seem to increase students' interaction with their faculty to see if those might be driving some of what we saw around sense of belonging. And what we found is that they were not significant, so we withdrew them from the model. So we had estimated that there were large positive relationships between sense of belonging and taking service learning courses. And what, as I mentioned, what we found was that those effects were positive overall, but that they weren't consistently positive. And this model, by the way, in its total, explains about 36% of the variation that we see in sense of belonging total. So it's a fairly robust model. So here is a figure to show those averages and the box and whiskers that we saw before with a little bit more clarity. You can see kind of some lines occurring here, a curve, a linear, I guess curve, not a line. And as I mentioned, we really wanted to investigate this relationship a little bit more clearly. So we used some post hoc tests to really investigate the difference between these variations, between how many courses students took. And as you can see here, even calculating in between means for the number of courses taken, the process still demonstrated that the expected means that we would see if we regress against those individual variables still caused a difference or demonstrated that the mean would for transfer students was increased overall, but that for students who took 2 to 4 service learning courses, the expected mean was slightly lower than those who had taken 1. And for those who had taken 4 or more, I'm sorry, that should be 5 or more, not, there's a misprint on my slide. There was a much more positive than students who had taken no service learning courses, 1 service learning course, or 2 to 4. So these predicted values support the idea that there may be a curvilinear relationship occurring here. So what are the indicated conclusions from this work? Clearly from this study, transfer students who participate in service learning courses post-transfer, after they transfer into a new institution, they are more likely, no matter how much service learning they participate in, they're more likely to develop a stronger sense of belonging at their new institution. And this stronger sense of belonging is related to increased retention and eventually persistence. That being said, the effects of service learning participation continues after controlling for, and this effect continues after controlling for other types of courses that have also been linked to increased positive psychological well-being. So other courses such as courses with high faculty interaction, problem-based learning courses, et cetera. Those are some of the courses we also tested for, that even in the presence of those courses, there's still a discernible significant effect from service learning participation. And that participation in multiple service learning courses are likely to have a nonlinear but still positive effect upon students' sense of belonging for transfer students. So we've suggested some implications here, both around institutions seeking to increase the success of their transfer students. We would strongly encourage them to consider how to provide well-integrated service learning courses into transfer students' curriculum. That could be both through providing curriculum development grants or providing professional development through teaching centers. We also encourage targeted programs such as living learning communities or bridge programs for transfer students to perhaps build service learning courses within those programs. We also encourage that institutions to think about or explore ways to provide professional development opportunities for faculty that really focus on integrating service learning and facilitating reflective discourse into their courses. At the institutional level, we encourage institutionalization of service learning. So some of our colleagues that have spoken today have talked about that, both organizational structure or institutional commitments, such as engaged departments around this pedagogy. And we encourage institutional policies that can reflect goals for increased commitment to service learning. So for instance, linking faculty promotion and tenure processes to understanding the extra work that faculty have to provide to teach service learning courses and to reward those. Finally, there's certainly some recommendations here or implications for future research. So for any of you that may be doing research or doing scholarly work in this area or looking for a dissertation topic, I would encourage more work in this area. It's a great field of research. Here's a list of our references, but I think we'd like to get into questions from the audience here. So I will stop sharing our screen here so that you can see all of us. And I did see a question from the chat about transfer students. So for this study, transfer students did not count students who were AP students or dual enrolled. This was, it was specifically from an institution of 2-year, fully enrolled in a 2-year institution to a 4-year institution or 4-year to 4-year institution. So it did not capture AP or dual enrolls. These were classically defined transfer students.
Great, and folks can enter their questions in the Q&A portion of this webinar, and our presenters will respond to those as well. The PowerPoints will be shared on the compact.org website under National Webinar Series. So we also do a posting of the recorded webinar along with any materials, including some of the articles that the presenters mentioned, as well as the PowerPoints.
There's a question about what does vertical transfer mean? So vertical and horizontal transfers are a term used in higher ed research. Vertical meaning from 2-year to 4-year institution, and horizontal meaning either 2-year to 2-year or 4-year to 4-year. So similar degree pursuit usually.
I can answer the question about the content of the service learning classes. We, in our annual model, also look at NESI data. So it's a bit of a triangulation of the quality of the learning experience. The 2 NESI factors, and actually we back end the NESI respondents, our seniors, into the banner system, because there is a question on the NESI about participating in community engaged service learning classes. And at VCU, our students, it's not a perfect alignment between the students that have actually taken service learning classes and those that say on the NESI they have had a community engagement service learning experience. So we clean that data up and look at the responses. The factors are faculty-student interaction and integrated learning. So the students, you know, if you're looking at what's the secret sauce that might be playing a role from our NESI data, each cohort, we're seeing those factors as different from service learning students and non-service learning students. Makes sense.
Aston and Aston also did a great study, I think it was in '98, so it's a little dated at this point in time, actually trying to parse the different differential effects from students who participated in volunteerism or community service and service learning courses. And they did some really nice work to show that participation in both had positive outcomes for students, but that service learning participation had much more positive effects, especially on academic outcomes. So Lynn's absolutely right. It's great if institutions have a mechanism to code in their courses what courses are service learning, or what sections of a course may be service learning, and to be able to then get some institutional data regarding student outcomes.
And that's what we have at UW Parkside. We have a specific designation for our courses. And I'm responding to this last question by Megan Brabeck. We have a Center for Community Engagement, and I actually had to complete a standardized form that provides a rationale for my community-based learning course and why it should have a permanent designation as that type of a class. And there are specific criteria that they have indicated are important to that designation. So it's not something that any faculty person can just decide, yes, this is CBL. there has to be some type of attention to criteria that are given by somebody, by an outside observer.
In making the case to institutionalize a tracking system, I think the best strategy is to try to use the language of your strategic plan or your quality enhancement program, whatever the institutional priorities are. Everyone's has something about student success, graduation rates, and I think these data that we're presenting today can help build a case that this is an approach. And if you're using service learning, your administrator should be interested in seeing how that's helping to accomplish the goals that the strategic plan outlines. So I would go that route.
There was a question in the chat about some pushback to connecting service learning courses to persistence and kind of academic outcomes. I don't know that I would agree that you shouldn't kind of still pursue those outcomes, but certainly the question about is there a self-selection bias that could be occurring is a great question. The research on this has actually shown when students are randomly put into service learning and non-service learning courses, that there are still similarly positive effects for students that were randomly placed in service learning courses versus those that chose. However, those have also shown that for students that do self-select into these courses, there can be increased inputs. And this, I think, goes back to some of the dosage effects. The highest predictor of students choosing a service learning course is previous service learning course participation. And that's because some of the, or at least in my experience, some of the qualitative work that we've done around interviewing students who participate in service learning courses is that they quickly kind of usually say, yeah, I learned a whole lot more. But what they really focus on is a lot of affective outcomes that they perceive to receive and that have been demonstrated in their participation. So sense of belonging, greater faculty interaction, feeling like they're making a difference in their community. For low-income and first-generation students, they oftentimes also talk about feeling like they're not leaving their home communities behind when they may be the first person in their family to go to college, but that they continue to give back. So there's a lot of other affective outcomes that come along with that as well.
Challenges, Melissa. Challenges related to gathering institutional data and helpful hints. At VCU, we did not have this kind of top-down mandate to do this work. It was very much a side door approach. So with the dissertation coming first and that data, we were able to just pull in some of the institutional research people and ask them in a pilot, could they help us to track some of this data? So really we weren't asking for an institutional change. We were asking to just do a tiny little pilot and see where the data landed. And so that was sort of our entry into making the case. Plus doing the pilot, they were creating those algorithms in the system anyway. So when we saw the data was positive, then it was an easy and small step to ask for, you know, these reports that we can gather now to be more available. So again, that might be a strategy to use.
We worked with what we had. Getting an institutional research department to add information or to change information is a monumental task. We didn't even want to go there. We worked with what was available.
There's a question about any plans to do the same type of study at two-year institutions. Can anyone speak to that?
I don't know of any.
I do know that I have not done this work specifically with only two-year institutions, but I do know that AACC, the American Association of Community Colleges, has actually sponsored research on service learning before. My co-author, Frank Fernandez, has done some work there specifically in community colleges. So I know AACC has at least funded some research in that area. I am not familiar vastly with that research base, though.
Mhm.
So there's some additional questions. Are these courses mostly exclusively opt-in, or are many models of required service learning courses?
I think we kind of talked about that already in terms of the analyses that we've used that factor in those and still predict service learning as a significant variable.
Yeah, I think we are seeing more institutions institutionalizing service learning because of the growing body of evidence to indicate both academic and affective outcomes. So you're seeing more institutions just build it into transition programs or first year experiences or different kind of institutional mechanisms. I think that we should be somewhat careful here. Some scholars have reminded service learning researchers that service learning as a pedagogy was a way of trying to kind of remember that education of our students can happen outside of the institution as well. And it was quite a radical teaching pedagogy when it was created. It was about honoring the lived experiences of others. And it has been linked to much greater development of civic awareness, civic knowledge, understanding of students as change agents. I think of those as all very positive things. And I think sometimes when we seek to institutionalize service learning just to increase students' academic success, we may not be prepared for the discourses across difference that really need to occur when implementing service learning well. So the idea around, Tania Mitchell, for instance, has a great article that came out, I think in 2005, where she talks about a critical model of service learning, big C critical, and kind of helping faculty and institutions think about how to really leverage their service learning courses to get all of the learning potential out of them.
So there's another question that came up. Can you speak to how faculty receive these findings and the best way to engage the faculty when one course is successful? Is it contagious?
I think there's early adopters on every campus, and they're going to be very helpful, I think, to you in building the case of the high impact of these practices. So to the extent that those folks can be spotlighted in web stories, can be acknowledged in department or college level faculty meetings, awards given to them, those are going to help to flame the contagion. But if there's a way also at the dean's level to share retention data or even student testimonials, nothing can persuade a board of visitors or a chancellor like students who talk passionately about their experiences in these classes. So I would give it the buckshot approach and try as many of those as you can on your class, on your campus.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Helen, please.
Oh, okay. There's the caution, and that is what we found is that faculty start to really become engaged in service learning after tenure, and that people previous to tenure are pretty much afraid to go into service learning. They want to make sure that they're secure in their positions before they actually dip their toes in the water. And so that's been a problem for incoming faculty when we're trying to promote service learning across the curriculum. Anyway, so that's been a problem.
And we've been able to work with department chairs because I think those annual review meetings are very powerful in terms of those early career faculty. And when there's a department chair who recognizes this as a high impact, innovative teaching approach that can be framed that way, they can be very supportive to faculty.
Right. Thank you, Lynn. Yes.
Well, we're right about it. We're right at time. So I just want to say thank you so much for our webinar presenters and for the attendees for participating. This was a very rich discussion, and thank you so much for the presentation of data and giving us ways to think about the correlation and connection around college completion and service learning. I also want to Remind our attendees of our regional conferences that are taking place. Tomorrow starts the Continuum of Service Conference that is hosted by the Western Region, and that will be in San Diego. I'm headed there myself this evening. We have our Eastern Regional Campus Compact Conference happening in Rhode Island, March 25th through the 27th. And then finally, our Midwest Campus Compact Conference taking place in Minneapolis, May 30th through the 31st. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Helen, Lynn, Debbie, and Travis. And until next time, see y'all. Bye-bye.